For more than 1,000 years, the British monarchy has survived everything that should have destroyed it. Viking invasions, civil wars, dynastic betrayals, failed heirs, deadly plagues, and global revolutions. Yet one family, generation after generation, held on to the crown through blood, strategy, diplomacy, and unshakable will. Their heroism shaped the identity of Britain and built the foundations of a global empire. This is not just the story of kings and queens. It is the story of ambition, sacrifice, love, hatred, and war. A dynasty that refused to fall when the world pushed it to the edge. Their journey is the true, heroic tale of Britain. Long before Britain was a united kingdom, long before crowns sparkled under palace lights, the island was divided into small kingdoms, constantly at war. Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, each fought for survival. There was no single leader, no empire, no idea of Britain. The land was fractured, and danger came from every direction. But the greatest threat arrived from the sea. Viking longships cutting through the waves, carrying warriors who burned towns, took hostages, and destroyed entire kingdoms. This is the world into which a boy named Alfred was born in 849, a boy who would become the first true architect of British monarchy. He was never supposed to be king. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, shy, thoughtful, more drawn to books than to battles. As a child, he visited Rome, where the Pope blessed him. Many saw it later as a sign of destiny, choosing him early. But destiny always tests its chosen ones. By the time Alfred reached adulthood, the Vikings had taken nearly all of England. Kingdom after kingdom fell, villages burned. Families were torn apart. Only one place still resisted: Wessex, ruled by Alfred's older brother, King Ethelred. Alfred fought beside him, a prince who learned war not from tutors, but from survival. When his brother died in 871, the crown fell to Alfred, but instead of ruling a kingdom, he inherited chaos. Wessex was the last surviving Anglo-Saxon kingdom, surrounded by enemies. For a moment, it seemed England would die. Viking armies crushed Alfred's forces. Towns surrendered. People fled, and Alfred, the King of Wessex, was driven into hiding. He lived in the marshes of Athelney, disguised, surviving on scraps. Planning his comeback, he was a king without a throne, without soldiers, without hope. But he did not give up. From the swamps, Alfred gathered loyal men, ordinary farmers, young boys, wounded soldiers, all driven by desperation and courage. In spring 878, Alfred returned. He led his people against the Viking warlord Guthrum in the Battle of Edington. A moment that decided the future of England. Against overwhelming odds, Alfred won. That victory changed everything. It stopped the complete collapse of Anglo-Saxon England. For the first time, the Vikings were forced to negotiate. Alfred's treaty divided the land, brought peace, and allowed him to rebuild his kingdom. But Alfred was more than a warrior king. He understood something most rulers never did. To survive, a kingdom needs more than soldiers. It needs knowledge, laws, cities, and identity. He built fortified towns, created the early English Navy, reformed the legal system, and started an education movement. He translated books into English so ordinary people could learn. For a man living in a violent age, this was revolutionary. His vision laid the foundation for a united England. After his death in 899, his children and grandchildren continued his mission. His grandson, Ethelstan, eventually unified England. Kings, after them, defended it. Queens expanded it. One day, their descendants would build the British Empire, the most influential empire in history. And it all began with a king who once hid in a swamp. Alfred the Great became the symbol of survival, the first hero of Britain. His courage, wisdom, and reforms shaped the monarchy that still exists today. Every British king and queen who followed walked the path he carved. After the death of Alfred the Great, the fragile kingdom he saved did not immediately become the mighty England we recognize today. Instead, it faced decades of uncertainty. Rival kings, Viking Resur Hensis internal betrayals, and constant fear that everything Alfred built could crumble. Yet it was his bloodline, a chain of determined rulers, who carried his legacy forward. Among them rose Edward the Elder and Ethelstan, men who transformed Alfred's survival into domination. Edward, Alfred's son, grew up watching his father fight for every inch of land. He inherited not just a crown, but a mission. Finish what Alfred started. Edward expanded fortified towns, strengthened armies, and pushed Viking forces back, step by step. But the true turning point came after him, with his son, often called the first king of all England. Ethelstan was raised inside a world of ambition and danger. He was groomed for greatness, trained to command armies and govern with firm authority. His leadership was tested early. Several nobles doubted him. Rivals tried to undermine him. The north of England refused to accept his rule. In those years, England was not one kingdom. There was many lands loosely connected, each with its own loyalties. Tonight, Tim Ethelstan needed something greater than diplomacy. He needed victory, and he achieved it in legendary fashion. In 937, Ethelstan faced a coalition of enemies in the Battle of one of the most important battles in British history. Vikings, Scots, and Irish kings united against him, determined to crush the English dream before it became a reality. The armies clashed in a brutal confrontation that lasted from dawn until sunset. Blood soaked the earth, thousands died, entire dynasties ended. Yet Ethelstan emerged victorious. This battle ensured that England would not break apart. It cemented Ethelstan as the first ruler of a united England, a title no king had held before. He centralized law, encouraged trade with Europe, strengthened the church, and elevated English influence across the continent. Under his leadership, kings from other nations sought alliances with England, respecting its growing power. But unification came at a cost. Rival lords feared the crown's rising authority. Powerful families in the north resisted royal control, and Ethelstan himself struggled with the loneliness that comes with leadership. Like many kings, he was torn between human emotion and royal duty. He never married. Historians suspect politics consumed his life entirely. Ethelstan ruled with brilliance, but he carried the weight of his crown in silence. His successor, Edmund I, inherited an England that was unified but far from secure. Viking warlords still sought revenge. Welsh kingdoms resisted English pressure. Internal rebellions threatened stability. Edmund fought relentlessly to protect what Ethelstan built. But tragedy struck early. He was assassinated at just 25 years old, during a feast, stabbed while defending a servant from an outlaw. His death shocked the kingdom and exposed the vulnerability of the monarchy. Yet the dynasty held strong through his brothers and sons, a passing of responsibility that showed how deeply Alfred's legacy had rooted itself into England's political identity. By the time Edgar the Peaceful came to power in the mid-900s, England experienced rare stability. Edgar's reign became a golden age, with strong administration, legal reforms, and cooperation between church and crown. England flourished, royal authority expanded, trade routes grew, and the monarchy's influence stretched beyond the island. Edgar's coronation later became the model for modern British coronations. The rituals performed for today, as kings and queens, originated from his ceremony over 1,000 years ago. But beneath the calm surface, the monarchy's greatest enemy was waiting. Generations pass, rulers change and cracks emerge. When Edgar died, succession disputes fractured the kingdom once again. Weak kings followed strong ones, and factions within the royal court intensified their fight for power. England entered a period of instability, allowing old enemies to rise once more. And from across the North Sea, an echo of past horrors, Viking longships once again set their course toward England. The peace Alfred's descendants worked for was fading, and England was on the brink of the most devastating invasion, yet one that would test the monarchy in ways no one could imagine. Yet through war, betrayal, and foreign conquest, the royal bloodline would still survive, and its survival would become one of the greatest stories in world history. As the 10th century drew toward its end, England once again found itself staring into the storm it thought had passed forever. The Viking threat, that ancient force that had terrorized Alfred the Great, returned with renewed ferocity. But this time it was not scattered war bands or wandering raiders. It was a coordinated, relentless machine of conquest, driven by ambitious kings across the sea. At the center of this new wave was Svein Forkbeard, the powerful ruler of Denmark, whose army swept across northern Europe like a tide. England, weakened by internal disputes after the death of King Edgar, was unprepared for what came next. The throne passed from ruler to ruler in rapid succession: young kings, uncertain kings, kings manipulated by rival factions. What England lacked most was unity. Into this fragile landscape stepped Tillard II, later known as Tithillard the Unready. His name did not mean unprepared, as commonly believed. In Old English, it meant ill-advised, a reflection of the deep mistrust between the king and his counselors. It was a symbolic failure, a ruler with power, but without guidance. Tillard faced impossible decisions from the moment he ascended the throne. Viking armies grew stronger each year, raiding towns, burning villages, and demanding tribute, known as danig. The king paid enormous sums of silver to buy peace, but peace bought with gold is never real. Each payment encouraged the Vikings to return with larger armies. Amid this chaos, one event marked a turning point in English history: St. Brice's Day Massacre, 1002. In a moment of fear and desperation, Tethellard ordered the killing of all Danes living in England. It was a decision rooted in panic, and it backfired catastrophically. Among the victims was the sister of Svein Forkbeard. The massacre ignited a rage that transformed invasion into vengeance. Svein vowed to destroy the English crown, and he nearly succeeded. By 1013, Svein invaded England with overwhelming force. Town after town surrendered. Nobles defected. Even London prepared for collapse. Tillard fled to Normandy, becoming a king without a kingdom. For the first time in centuries, England had fallen to a foreign conqueror, but fate is inconsistent and power is always fragile. Svein died suddenly just months later. His son, Canute, inherited the ambition to take England, but lacked immediate control. English nobles, desperate for stability, invited Tillard back, hoping he had learned from the past. He hadn't. The kingdom fractured again under political tension and renewed Viking attacks. When Tillard died, his son Edmund Ironside inherited a nation on fire. Unlike his father, Edmund was a warrior. He fought Canute in battle after battle, refusing to surrender despite impossible odds. His courage earned him the name Ironside, yet the war drained the country. Neither side could claim a decisive victory. Finally, they agreed to divide the kingdom, Edmund ruling the south and Canute the north. But within mere weeks, Edmund died suddenly, leaving Canute the undisputed king of all England. Canute's rise could have uprooted the monarchy forever. He was a foreigner, a conqueror, someone who might erase the English royal line. Yet his reign took a surprising turn. Instead of crushing English traditions, Canute embraced them. He married Emma of Normandy, former Queen of Athelard, binding himself to the old dynasty. He adopted English laws, supported the church, and presented himself as a legitimate, stabilizing ruler, not a destroyer. Under Canute, England, Denmark, and Norway formed a vast North Sea. Two, connecting trade routes and military power across Northern Europe. This era brought wealth, order, and international prestige to England. But empires built in haste often fall just as quickly. When Canute VIII, his sons proved weak and unprepared. The empire crumbled, foreign influence fractured, and England once again searched for leadership. And in a remarkable twist of fate, the English throne returned to the old line, to Edward the Confessor, son of Edward's reign marked the end of an era, the final years of the Anglo-Saxon dynasty. It was Pius gentle and more interested in religion than politics, but he tried to restore stability after decades of upheaval. Yet the seeds of disaster were already sown. Powerful nobles, especially Harold Godwinson and the Norman Duke William, began competing for influence. When Edward died, childless, in 1066, the question of succession ignited the most pivotal moment in all British history. The calm before the storm was over. A new age of conquest was about to begin, one that would reshape England, the monarchy, and the entire future of the British Empire. The year 1066 would forever be etched in the annals of English history. The year when destiny collided with ambition, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdom faced its ultimate trial. Edward the Confessor had passed, leaving no heir. The throne was up for grabs, and the strongest claimants, Harald Godwinson, Harald Hardrada of Norway, and Duke William of Normandy, were poised to strike. England's future hung in the balance, its ancient royal bloodline threatened by foreign ambition. Harold Godwinson, a seasoned English noble with military experience, was crowned king almost immediately after Edward's death. He understood the stakes. England had survived Viking invasions, civil unrest, and dynastic chaos. Now it faced a challenge from across the sea. Yet, even as he prepared his defenses, Harold had no time to rest. News arrived that Harald Hardrada, the fearsome king of Norway, had landed in the north with a massive army, intending to seize the crown by force. The Battle of Stamford Bridge erupted on September 25, 1066. Harold's forces, battle-hardened yet weary, fought with ferocity against the Norwegian invaders. The clash was brutal. Spears shattered shields, swords cut through armor, and the air was thick with the cries of men and the clash of metal. Against all odds, Harold emerged victorious, killing Hardrada and securing the northern lands. England breathed a temporary sigh of relief, but the reprieve was short-lived. News of another invasion arrived from the south. Duke William of Normandy, known as William the Conqueror, had landed on English shores with a disciplined, battle-ready army. Harold's men, exhausted from Stamford Bridge, had to march south at breakneck speed. England's fate now depended on a single confrontation. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14, 1066, would decide the destiny of the English throne. The morning sky was dark and foreboding, heavy with tension. Harold's army formed a shield wall on Senlac Hill, resolute and determined. William's forces, a combination of cavalry, infantry, and archers, advanced strategically, testing the Anglo-Saxon defenses. Hours of relentless combat ensued. Men fell by the thousands, the ground soaked with blood, the air filled with screams and the roar of war. Harold fought bravely, embodying the spirit of the Anglo-Saxon kings before him. Yet fate intervened. An arrow struck his eye, and the last king of the Anglo-Saxon line fell. His death marked the end of an era. William, triumphant and relentless, would soon be crowned King of England, forever altering the trajectory of the monarchy. William's conquest was not merely a military victory. It was the beginning of a cultural and political revolution. The Normans introduced feudalism, reshaped the aristocracy, and established new centers of power. Castles rose across the landscape, symbols of control and authority, while the old Anglo-Saxon nobility was gradually replaced by Norman lords loyal to the crown. This transformation ensured that the monarchy would be stronger, centralized, and more capable of asserting control over a vast and diverse kingdom. The ripple effects of 1066 extended far beyond England. William's descendants would continue to rule, merging Norman and Anglo-Saxon traditions to create a monarchy that balanced military strength with diplomatic finesse. The monarchy learned from the chaos of succession and invasion, emphasizing strategic alliances, careful management of nobles, and the consolidation of power, lessons that would resonate through centuries of British history. Yet William's reign was not without challenges. Revolts erupted across England. Loglors tested his authority, and uprisings in Wales and Scotland demanded constant attention. He responded with a mix of force and administration, famously commissioning the Doomsday Book to assess and organize his kingdom. This meticulous record-keeping reflected a new approach to governance, one that combined oversight, accountability, and the projection of royal authority, a system that allowed the monarchy to endure and adapt. Through these trials, the English crown emerged resilient. The lessons learned from invasions, battles, and shifting allegiances instilled a culture of vigilance and strategic thinking within the monarchy. The fusion of Anglo-Saxon and Norman traditions laid the groundwork for future rulers to maintain stability, expand influence, and navigate the complex web of European politics. By the end of William's reign, England was transformed, militarily secure, administratively organized, and politically centralized. The monarchy had survived near annihilation and emerged stronger than ever, a testament to the adaptability and vision of its rulers. The stage was set for a lineage that would endure for centuries, carrying forward lessons of resilience, diplomacy, and power that would shape the destiny of the British Empire. The shadow of Hastings lingered in memory, a reminder that monarchy was not guaranteed by birth alone. Strength, wisdom, and the ability to navigate both war and politics were essential. The heroic tales of England's kings and queens were not simply stories of victory. They were lessons in survival, foresight, and the relentless pursuit of stability. And as the Normans and Anglo-Saxons merged, a new chapter in the epic saga of the British monarchy had begun. The 12th century brought both triumph and turmoil to the English crown, a time when the monarchy's authority was continually tested by rebellion, familial strife, and continental politics. Henry II, the first Plantagenet king, ascended the throne in 1154, inheriting a realm fractured by civil war yet rich with potential. His claim came not only through blood but through strategic marriages and alliances that tied England to vast territories in France, creating the Angevin Empire, a realm that extended from Scotland to the Pyrenees. Henry understood that ruling such a vast domain required more than brute force. It demanded law, administration, and the loyalty of both nobles and clergy. From the outset, Henry set out to consolidate power. He reformed the judicial system, establishing common law as a unifying legal framework. Traveling courts, known as heirs, brought royal justice to every corner of the kingdom, strengthening the monarch's authority while curbing local abuses. Taxes and feudal obligations were standardized, creating predictable structures for revenue and loyalty. Henry's innovations were not merely administrative. They were acts of survival, ensuring that the crown remained the ultimate arbiter of justice and power. Yet the monarchy's consolidation faced challenges from within. Henry's family was both his strength and his undoing. His marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine secured vast lands and wealth, but their union was also a crucible of personal and political tension. Their sons, William D. Young, Henry the Young King, Richard, Geoffrey, and John became players in a dangerous dynastic drama. The king's desire to control his heirs clashed with their ambitions, leading to rebellions and confrontations that tested the very fabric of the monarchy. These familial conflicts underscored a central truth. Survival of the crown depended not only on external threats, but on managing the volatile passions of bloodline heirs. The church also played a pivotal role in shaping the monarchy. Henry's relationship with Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, exemplified the delicate balance of royal authority and religious influence. Initially allies, the king and archbishop soon clashed over jurisdictional power and the rights of clergy. Becket's martyrdom in 1170 shocked Europe, illustrating that the monarchy operated within a network of moral and spiritual forces that could challenge its authority. Henry's response: penance, reconciliation, and political recalibration demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of public perception and divine sanction, lessons that would guide future monarchs in navigating both secular and spiritual domains. Henry's military endeavors were equally significant. Campaigns in France, rebellions in Ireland, and border conflicts with Wales and Scotland demanded strategic brilliance. The king relied on loyal nobles, mercenary forces, and meticulously organized supply chains, ensuring that the monarchy's military presence reinforced political authority. Battles were not merely fought for territory. They were exercises in demonstrating power, deterring the ascent and projecting the crown's reach across the continent. Diplomacy became another crucial instrument. Henry negotiated marriages, treaties, and alliances with neighboring kingdoms, understanding that influence extended beyond armies. His daughters were married into powerful European houses, binding England to networks of obligation, loyalty, and opportunity. The monarchy's reach was thus expanded through both war and careful negotiation, ensuring that the crown's authority resonated across regions and generations. Despite these successes, Henry's later years were marked by familial strife and rebellion. His son's repeated insurrections revealed the fragility of dynastic succession. Yet, the king's political acumen, combined with his control over administration and justice, allowed him to quell uprisings and maintain the integrity of his empire. These crises were not failures but lessons in governance. The monarchy's strength depended on adaptability, negotiation, and foresight, as much as on inherited power. Henry II's reign ultimately transformed the English monarchy. Through legal reforms, administrative centralization, strategic marriages, and deft diplomacy, he established a model for effective rule that would influence generations of Plantagenet kings. The crown emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of how to wield authority both domestically and internationally. The heroic tales of his reign were not merely stories of conquest. They were lessons in governance, resilience, and the delicate interplay of power, family, and faith. The Plantagenet era illustrated the evolving nature of monarchy, a delicate balancing act between war and diplomacy, ambition and restraint, secular authority and divine sanction. Each decision, each rebellion, and each treaty left a legacy that shaped the monarchy's enduring presence. Henry II's life demonstrated that the crown was not static, but a living institution, capable of adaptation, consolidation, and projection of power across a complex and changing world. As England stabilized under Henry's reforms, the monarchy learned one of its most enduring lessons. To survive, it must command respect without inciting rebellion, exercise power without overreach, and combine justice, diplomacy, and military might in a manner that reinforced legitimacy. This template would guide English kings and queens for centuries, forming the foundation for a dynasty whose influence extended far beyond its immediate realm. 13th century ushered in a period of both consolidation and conflict, exemplified by the reigns of kings such as Richard I, John, and Henry III. The monarchy faced unprecedented challenges, maintaining authority across vast lands, managing noble ambitions, and responding to growing demands for accountability. The heroic tales of the British crown were intertwined with battles, legal innovations, and diplomatic negotiations that solidified its enduring power. Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, embodied the chivalric ideals of the era. Ascending the throne in 1189, he became a symbol of martial prowess, leading the Third Crusade in a quest to reclaim the Holy Land. Richard's campaigns, while distant from English soil, elevated the monarchy's prestige internationally. Yet his frequent absences forced the crown to rely on administrators, nobles, and regents to govern domestically, highlighting a key lesson. The survival of the monarchy depended on a capable bureaucratic structure, not just the charisma of its sovereign. Richard's military exploits, though celebrated, strained resources and finances. Heavy taxation and the imposition of scutage payments in lieu of military service created tensions with the barons, foreshadowing future conflicts over royal authority. These fiscal pressures demonstrated that even the most heroic king could not exercise unchecked power. Legitimacy required careful negotiation with influential stakeholders. Following Richard's death in 1199, his brother John ascended the throne, facing immediate challenges. Unlike Richard, John lacked charisma and military acclaim, and his reign was marked by internal rebellion and loss of continental territories. The king's disputes with the barons over feudal rights and taxation culminated in the Magna Carta of 1215, a document that became a cornerstone of constitutional governance. While John reluctantly affixed his seal, the Magna Carta symbolized a crucial moment. The monarchy, for the first time, formally acknowledged limits on its authority, balancing power with legal accountability. Henry III, John's son, inherited a crown in turmoil but gradually restored stability. His reign focused on administrative consolidation, construction of monumental structures such as Westminster Abbey, and careful negotiation with barons to maintain loyalty. These efforts illustrated the evolving nature of the monarchy. It was no longer solely a warrior institution, but also a center of governance, culture, and diplomacy. The crown's survival depended on balancing tradition with innovation, authority with accommodation. Throughout this period, the monarchy honed its diplomatic skills. Marriage alliances with continental powers secured strategic advantages, while ambassadors and envoys managed relationships across Europe. The crown's ability to navigate these complex networks reinforced its legitimacy and extended its influence far beyond the British Isles. Diplomacy, combined with legal reform and strategic governance, ensured that the monarchy remained resilient even in times of internal dissent. Military campaigns continued to shape the monarchy's narrative. Conflicts with Wales, Scotland, and Ireland tested the crown's authority, requiring both martial skill and political negotiation. The deployment of loyal knights, the forging of treaties, and the integration of local elites into royal administration reinforced the monarchy's control. Power was projected not solely through conquest, but through the subtle orchestration of loyalty, law, and governance. The 13th century also saw the growth of administrative sophistication. The use of written records, such as the pipe rolls, allowed for systematic taxation and auditing of royal revenues. The crown's bureaucracy expanded, incorporating scribes, clerks, and legal officers who ensured that authority was exercised efficiently and transparently. These innovations reduced reliance on personal charisma and reinforced the institutional strength of the monarchy, laying the groundwork for centuries of stable governance. Religion remained central to royal legitimacy. Coronations, public ceremonies, and patronage of the church emphasized divine sanction, linking monarchy to moral authority. The church, while powerful, was also a partner in governance. Its support legitimized the crown's rule and provided a moral framework for law and administration. Monarchs learned that spiritual endorsement could reinforce political authority, creating a dual foundation of power, temporal and sacred. By the end of the 13th century, the heroic tales of kings, such as Richard, John, and Henry III demonstrated that survival and influence required more than military might. The monarchy's strength lay in its adaptability, the ability to manage conflict, build alliances, implement legal reforms, and engage in diplomacy. Each king contributed lessons that would shape future generations, ensuring that the crown remained a resilient and respected institution. This era underscored a vital principle. The British monarchy's endurance depended on the interplay of power, law, diplomacy, and symbolism. The crown's authority was not absolute, but carefully negotiated with barons, clergy, and foreign powers. By cultivating loyalty, exercising prudence, and embracing both tradition and innovation, the monarchy secured its position, paving the way for the stability and global influence that would characterize later centuries. The 13th century's legacy was clear. Heroic deeds, wise governance, and strategic alliances reinforced the monarchy's resilience. The crown was no longer a simple seat of power. It was a complex institution capable of navigating political, military, and religious landscapes. The lessons of this era would inform every future British king and queen, ensuring that the monarchy remained an enduring symbol of authority, continuity, and national identity. The 14th century introduced new challenges and opportunities that tested the resilience of the British monarchy. This era, marked by dynastic struggles, military campaigns, and the rise of parliamentary influence, cemented the crown's position as a central pillar of national identity. Kings, such as Edward I, Edward II, and Edward III, navigated a complex landscape where authority had to be continuously asserted, negotiated, and refined. Edward I, known as Longshanks, demonstrated the monarchy's strategic acumen through both warfare and legislation. His campaigns in Wales and Scotland sought to consolidate royal control over the British Isles. Castles rose across the landscape as both military fortresses and symbols of sovereign authority. These monumental constructions reinforced the monarchy's presence and reminded subjects of the crown's enduring power. Beyond the battlefield, Edward enacted legal reforms that standardized governance, strengthening the administrative foundation for generations to come. The careful blending of military might with legal authority exemplified the monarchy's evolving approach to sustaining influence. Edward II's reign, however, revealed the fragility inherent in royal authority. Lacking his father's political skill, Edward II struggled to assert control over rebellious barons and court factions. His favoritism toward certain nobles incited resentment, resulting in open revolts and eventual deposition. The king's failures illustrated that charisma and lineage alone could not guarantee survival. Legitimacy required prudence, political insight, and the ability to maintain noble alliances. Edward II's downfall became a cautionary tale that shaped the governance strategies of subsequent monarchs. Edward III inherited the throne amid this turbulence and proved to be a transformative figure. His military campaigns, particularly in the 100 Years' War against France, reinforced the monarchy's heroic image. Victories at battles like Crécy and Poitiers elevated the crown as prestige while fostering a sense of national unity. Edward's reign also witnessed the formalization of parliamentary structures, reflecting the monarchy's growing willingness to engage with representative institutions. By balancing war, diplomacy, and domestic administration, Edward III strengthened both the monarchy's reputation and its practical authority. Dynastic politics shaped much of the era. Marriages were arranged to secure alliances, prevent hostilities, and reinforce claims to contested territories. Queens consort and princesses often played vital roles as mediators and patrons, ensuring that the royal family's influence extended into both domestic and international spheres. These unions were carefully orchestrated to reinforce the monarchy's strategic objectives, blending personal relationships with political necessity. The monarchy's survival during the 14th century also depended on its response to crises. The Black Death, social unrest, and regional revolts demanded a combination of authority, diplomacy, and moral leadership. Monarchs who engaged with their subjects thoughtfully, while maintaining the aura of divine right, could stabilize the realm and reinforce loyalty. Symbolism, coronations, public appearances, religious observances remained a critical tool, reinforcing the crown's legitimacy even during periods of uncertainty. Military innovation and organization became increasingly important. Kings developed permanent forces, professionalized the nobility's military obligations, and leveraged fortifications to control rebellious regions. The interplay of strategic foresight, logistical planning, and political negotiation ensured that royal authority could be projected effectively without destabilizing the domestic order. Heroism, in this context, was not merely martial. It was the capacity to manage multiple levers of power simultaneously. Religious authority continued to underpin the monarchy's legitimacy. Royal patronage of cathedrals, monasteries, and religious orders linked the crown to the moral and spiritual life of the nation. Clergy acted as both advisors and intermediaries, extending the monarchy's influence into communities and reinforcing obedience. The intertwining of faith and governance ensured that the crown's authority was perceived as divinely sanctioned, bolstering the perception of heroism beyond the battlefield. Legal and administrative sophistication evolved as well. Royal courts, charters, and decrees formalized governance, providing mechanisms to enforce justice, levy taxes, and arbitrate disputes. By institutionalizing authority, the monarchy reduced dependence on personal charisma and enhanced its capacity to maintain order across the kingdom. These innovations laid the groundwork for centuries of continuity, demonstrating that the crown's endurance relied as much on governance as on heroism. By the century's end, the British monarchy had emerged as both a resilient institution and a symbol of national identity. Heroic tallies of military victories, diplomatic skill, and effective governance intertwined with cautionary lessons about failed leadership. Kings and queens learned that survival depended on a delicate balance of courage, strategy, and diplomacy, along with the subtle orchestration of alliances, law, and religion. The legacy of the 14th century reinforced the notion that the crown's heroism was multifaceted. It was expressed not only through martial prowess, but through wisdom, resilience, and the capacity to navigate crises. This period cemented the foundation for future monarchs, who would inherit both the glory and the responsibility of maintaining Britain's enduring royal legacy. The late medieval period transitioned the British monarchy from the heroic exploits of the battlefield to the intricate navigation of diplomacy, governance, and legacy building. The experiences of Edward III, Richard II, and the early Lancastrian kings demonstrated that royal power was as dependent on political savvy as on military skill. The crown's ability to survive centuries of upheaval, plagues, revolts, contested successions relied on mastering both visible and invisible levers of influence. Richard II, ascending as a young king, faced immense challenges in asserting authority over powerful nobles. His reign highlighted the fragile balance between youthful idealism and the practical demands of rule. The king's efforts to centralize power and enforce loyalty often clashed with entrenched baronial interests, resulting in rebellions that exposed vulnerabilities in the monarchy's structure. Richard's deposition by Henry Bolingbroke marked a pivotal moment, illustrating that legitimacy required more than bloodline. It required continuous negotiation with political realities. The Lancastrian dynasty, beginning with Henry IV, emphasized consolidation and survival. The new kings learned from past failures, combining military strategy with careful alliance building, fiscal prudence, and attention to public perception. Henry V, in particular, exemplified heroic leadership through the victories of the Hundred Years' War, including the famous triumph at Agag. His campaigns were celebrated not only for martial success, but also for their role in uniting the kingdom under a shared sense of national pride. Royal ceremonies and symbolism became increasingly crucial in projecting power. Coronations, state processions, and court rituals reinforced the monarch's sacred and temporal authority. These public displays were complemented by strategic marriages, patronage of the arts, and support for religious institutions. Together, these actions created a narrative of legitimacy and heroism that strengthened the monarchy's enduring influence. The crown's resilience depended heavily on institutional development. The growth of royal administration, professional courts, and formalized taxation systems allowed monarchs to govern more efficiently and respond to crises with structured authority. Advisors, secretaries, and ministers provided indispensable guidance, ensuring that the monarchy could balance personal judgment with systemic governance. These innovations laid the groundwork for the modern British monarchy, where tradition and pragmatism coexist. Diplomacy and foreign alliances became central to sustaining royal influence. Negotiations with France, Scotland, and other European powers required both strategic marriages and military presence. Monarchs cultivated networks of loyalty that extended across borders, demonstrating that the heroism of the crown was not confined to domestic affairs, but projected internationally. Through calculated diplomacy, the British monarchy safeguarded its interests, expanded influence, and reinforced the perception of invincible authority. Religion remained a cornerstone of legitimacy. The Church's endorsement, divine right doctrine, and participation in religious ceremonies all reinforced the moral and spiritual dimensions of kingship. Monarchs who could skillfully integrate faith with governance not only secured obedience, but also created enduring myths of heroism, sacrifice, and divine favor. These narratives shaped public perception and ensured continuity even in times of political turbulence. By the conclusion of the medieval period, the British monarchy had mastered the delicate interplay of heroism, diplomacy, and governance. Kings and queens had learned that personal courage alone was insufficient. Survival and legacy required wisdom, patience, and the art of negotiation. Each victory, each policy, each carefully managed crisis contributed to a cumulative legacy that extended far beyond the reign of any single monarch. The enduring power of the British royal family lay in its ability to adapt. Through centuries of warfare, political intrigue, and social transformation, the monarchy evolved while maintaining core principles: the embodiment of national identity, the integration of moral and political authority, and the projection of heroism in multiple forms. The lessons of this era would resonate across generations, influencing the Tudors, Stuarts, and ultimately the modern monarchy. In conclusion, the heroic tales of the British crown are not merely chronicles of kings and queens on the battlefield. They are narratives of resilience, strategy, and vision. From Edward VI's legal reforms and military campaigns to Henry V's celebrated victories, each monarch contributed to a legacy of strength, continuity, and symbolic heroism. The British monarchy survived and thrived by understanding the intricate balance between power and perception, authority and diplomacy, tradition and innovation. Their story offers timeless insight into leadership, endurance, and the profound capacity of a royal institution to shape the destiny of a nation and influence the modern world.